So welcome to the SIIA issue brief on emerging content technologies. Every publisher needs to know. It's really great to see the range of publishers and media companies here. So I'm really expecting some interesting questions from the very diverse points of view of everybody in the room. Our panel today, I am your host, Kathy Greenler-Sexton, and I am the Vice President and General Manager at the SIIA's Content and Information Services Division. And Pat Sabosic, who is President of Elm City Consulting, is our moderator today. Along with Pat, we have a very esteemed panel: Mark Jacobson, Senior Consultant from DataThink, Terry Mendelson from Mendelson Consulting, and Jerry Mintz, Managing Partner of Percepta Partners. I have sat on many a call with this group, and today's session is going to be incredibly informative, and I'm really excited to kind of hear what you think about that. I'm going to let Pat really run the show after I say a couple of introductory remarks, and I'll let everybody kind of introduce your expertise in your own bios. So first of all, when you came in, there's a couple things. I'd like to thank Dorsey. Dorsey has provided this space and is treating all of us to our afternoon snack. So if you see anybody from the Dorsey team, please thank them. They're very generous with their space and supporting industry associations and industry companies. So thank you to Dorsey. The session here today is being recorded. Afterwards, I will send out a PDF version of all the slides. I will send you a link to the on-demand version of this, and I will also send an updated roster for everybody. I know a number of people registered in the last, a few people registered in the last 4 or 5 days, and that just didn't get onto the current roster. So just a heads up on some of that housekeeping. So for those of you who are not familiar with the SIIA, we are an 850 member organization that really spans the breadth of the information and software industry. There's many great brands that you recognize, and we also include many innovative startups, some of whom are here. We are comprised of 8 divisions supporting advocacy, intellectual property protection, education and training, enablement of business development and sales, and peer networking. This program is really about education and networking for you. And as you can see, we really do span a lot of industry verticals throughout the industry. And I invite everybody to participate in any of our division activities, be it intellectual property protection programs, to our SIPA and ABM. My colleagues there, we really serve the publishing and the media segment, the financial segment, education, and software. There's many programs happening literally every day across the SIIA. My colleagues across Content and Information Services, SIPA and ABM, in order to make things easier for all of you, we've partnered and call ourselves the Business Information and Media Group. And you can see our priorities of different topics and trends that we're monitoring. And we hope really to do all of you to serve you by creating programs that really support the education and networking of professionals really involved in all that you see on this slide. I'm not going to do reading this. This is for your linking and reviewing after the conference. But we have a few upcoming conferences. I do want to highlight that we have a brand new conference in the fall that I'm working on with my colleagues from SIPA and ABM called the Business Information and Media Summit. We have a number of smaller events like this that are happening over the next 30 or so days. We have a number of info local meetings, and these are meetings in about 8 cities, Toronto plus throughout the United States, where we have dinners and conversations, and generally it's a small group and for dinner, for conversation, and they are really great activities to get involved with, and I can certainly send you some information. The Cody Awards are coming up, just a little plug on that. And for our members, we have recently launched 19 peer-to-peer member working groups, which range from technology working group, which I was just talking to you about, and then to the Business Information Council, scholarly publishing, STM. So we've got a lot of activity that you may or may not be aware of. So if you want to be educated, or your team needs to be educated, by all means, just feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to update you on everything. So that's it for my comments. I'll let everybody get to the heart of the program today, and I'd like to invite Pat Zabosik up to the podium. Pat?
I put the mic on?
He's mic'd it, so you don't need to worry about it.
I'll just be careful of the papers. Thanks a lot for coming. We're really excited to be here. We are really excited to be here. And we have, I think, an excellent panel coming. Oh, I know. Here we go. Okay, we're really excited to be here. Let me say that again for the camera. I'm not going to read the slide, but I am going to tell you that with content technology, that the trends that I see emerging with these particular technologies, it's affecting every market segment. And I see that the technologies themselves, content technologies, are clustered into three particular areas, or can be categorized as aggregation tools, process tools, and delivery tools. All publishers have large stores of actual primary content, secondary content, metadata, and the trend is to extract entities from that content and recombine it in different ways to create new products. A couple of examples are the ALM Legal Publishers product called Verdict Search. It's been in the market for a while, and it really is an extraction of the verdicts on personal injury or cases. What litigation lawyers want to know is, what did the judge rule and how much was the award? So that serves a market need. There are triple stores that are being developed by the STM community that are just sitting on large content databases that will begin to redefine the way we do research. Open access is changing it's not only changing the dynamics, but it's changing the economics of the journal publishing industry. And we see that adaptive learning and the multi-user open online courses are changing the way students learn. Mobile, particularly the mobile consumption of content, is in its very early stages. It certainly is beyond restaurant reviews, and I think with the introduction of location-based services, we're going to see another whole new class of content being developed. And both Jerry and Terry are going to be talking about that. And Mark is going to be spending some time on entity extraction, and we'll weave this into our story. The next slide talks about this as a story of transformation and scale of data. It's also about timing and speed. So everybody, I thought about putting up a slide on the ramp up of content, the ramp up of scale, the ramp up of large data sets, but instead I'll give you a couple of sound bites. Data production by 2020 will be 44 times greater than it was in 2009. So that's like 5 years ago. So that's not just storage. That's the actual content itself. Individuals create 70% of the content. Okay, we know that. Enterprises store 80% of it. And those enterprises are new enterprises now. Amazon, Facebook, Google. So we have a whole different range of who's storing the content and who's delivering the content. So when we're talking about the managing the scale of data, we're also talking about how we visualize the content and how we also help to manage it. So it's not only about management, it's also about visualization. This is an extraction of a Gartner Magic Quadrant report on business intelligence and analytic platforms. And what we see in their top right-hand quadrant, which is vision and leadership, are three types of companies: the emerging companies, the enterprise companies who have to adapt, and the infrastructure companies who have to support the enterprise. In what's the takeaway really on this slide is the analysis is shifting out of the data warehouse, out of designated financial and business intelligence units, into the actual operating units and into the actual operating departments. Product management is becoming much more attuned to not only managing their data, but visualizing their data. And tools like Tableau and Burst on the product manager's desktop or access to a data set is really changing the way we visualize and think about our product development. And Terry will show some examples of this. It's really very exciting. The next slide, I think you're probably all familiar with. This is the old roadmap from content to consumer. Today's roadmap is not that simple. And one of the bigger disruptors is that authors are becoming their own publishers. Our panel looked at the drivers that are affecting this flow and the outputs. So we have integrated workflow, collaboration, certainly in product development, looking at new partners, and data visualization. And we'll see that as the panelists move forward. So from this, what's the next challenge? So here's a snapshot of a number of new companies and new technologies. When I began to look at the technology space over the last 6 months, just sort of putting my research hat on and sort of thinking about strategy, what I began to see is that these companies were clustering into different categories, and those categories can map to the roadmap. Regardless of whether it's linear, whether it's bifurcated, there still are going to be some ways that you can essentially incorporate some new technologies just to do things differently, whether your customers are demanding it or whether it's to be a competitive protection. So thinking about these clustering under the different categories of the publishing workflow, we can create content or we can aggregate it. We can develop it and we can visualize it with the analytics and visualization tools. We can make it digital, we can make it mobile, and we can collect on it. SIPEX, I'll just outline a couple of them. SIPEX manages copyright compliance for fee-based articles in the higher ed space. 28IO is a new search platform for developing content that can sit on top of a triple store. Coney is a mobile development platform. So those are just a few of them that I've identified that I think have some staying power and can be leaders in their particular segments over time. So with that, how does a company make a decision as to which way to go in the publishing roadmap, and where are the biggest opportunities and where are the biggest threats? And corporate strategy will help define some of that. It'll guide the decisions, not in all cases, but in many cases, particularly for larger companies who want to make sure that the strategy is right. If you're a public company, to make sure that you've got the right message to shareholders. Sales and marketing and your customers are much closer to the market than sometimes than corporate planners. I've spent a number of years in corporate planning, so I know that if you'll die if you don't get out into the market and talk to your customers and to your salespeople. And so sometimes the strategy can be the best strategy in the world, but being close to the market can really show you what your direction needs to be. And really where I see a number of our opportunities, particularly for the STM, higher ed market, education market, professional market, is really in the competitive opportunities. Just because of the content sets, because of the data sets, there's a uniqueness that can be leveraged across a number of platforms. And I think that's what it's not only that, I think that's what we're seeing. So The next, yeah. Okay. So can you all, now you can hear me better than you did before. The next slide is really our segue slide. But before I do that, this slide, there's a lot of companies on here. There's an appendix to this presentation where I have the URLs for and a little description for every single one of these. So if there's something that's of interest to you or you didn't hear about it before, then you can go there and take a look at it. As we begin to look at what's our cohesive thread to explain what we're trying to do today, and also to leverage the expertise of all of us as consultants. I have my own consulting company. We all are consultants in some in the same ways and some in different ways. And we all have strengths in digital content strategy, pricing, etc. So what we're going to, how we map our presentations into the corporate strategy or into any strategy is to look at where do we find top line growth? I mean, generally in new products, acquisitions of course, but also in new products. And Terry is going to talk a little bit about how some companies are using visualization tools to create new products and also to gain insight into a current market. And Jerry is going to talk about workflow and open data and mobile and how that creates not only new products but customer effectiveness and also contributes to bottom line growth. Mark is going to spend some time talking about semantics and how how an STM publisher has used their core competency and unique content to create new product types. And that can be leveraged across not only that type of publisher, but many other publishers as well. And I've talked a little bit about the trends, and I'll do a wrap-up at the end. So with that, Mark's presentation will build a foundation. Terry's will give you that application of a foundation for product development, and Jerry will tie it together with a workflow analysis. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mark.
Thank you, Pat. So, good afternoon or early evening, depending on how you want to look at it, everyone. Mark Jacobson, I'm a senior analyst with Delta Think. I've been with them for a few years, and I've been a consultant in the publishing industry. Depending on how you look at it, about 25 years. I think even in my staff positions, it was always very consultative. Delta Think works a lot in STM publishing space, scientific, technical, medical, but also educational, some trade, really a variety of places, and working on projects often that have something to do with technology. But we really work with people on everything from content strategy all the way down through and helping lead at times implementation projects as well. And one of the things we're seeing a lot with our customers is an interest in semantic technology. And I wanted to just, for people that maybe are new to the concept, which I doubt is a whole lot of you, but just to kind of set the stage for that, semantics is just anything relating to meaning in language, right? So there's a lot that goes on when we communicate that is not just about the word that's in front of us, right? But we infer a lot of meaning. We create context that tells us what the meaning is. And semantic technology is that branch of technology that's helping machines to be able to understand that context, to understand what is meant. So some examples of the technologies in that space are natural language processing, data mining, categorization, classification. And so what's driving the adoption of semantic technology is it's just such a huge volume of information that's available to everyone. How do I find what matters to me? It's really, really pretty overwhelming. There's a big trend with many of our publisher customers where they want to put all of their content into a single interface for their customers. So we're no longer thinking about, we have books and chapters, we have journals and articles, we have newsletters, we have all this different kind of content. And those things are artificial because they came from the physical constraints of the print world, right? They came about because of how we could deliver that content to people. We put them in these silos. But the user doesn't care about that anymore. They want information, they want answers. They don't care if it came from a chapter or an article. You know, in a sense, they want to understand it because there's a timeliness and a life cycle inherent in those things, but they want content, they want information on topics, and they want access to all of that. So I think if you take that idea out, there's really, I think I see a shift coming away from those artificial product boundaries and towards, you know, we publish on a topic. And here's everything we have on that topic, and there's larger bits of content and there's smaller bits of content, but it's really just the coverage that people want to see. So I'm going to just kind of do a little bit of a case study for one of the publishers that I worked with on a semantic technology project, and their goal was to provide their members, it's the American Society for Microbiology, oldest and largest single life science membership organization in the world, 43,000 members, 26 different disciplines. So really a lot of very specialized interests among their membership. And people need to find what matters to them, and they need to find that information quickly. They publish books and journals and meeting abstracts and just such a variety of content. And at the start of this project, it's all over the place. The journals were mostly in one place, but the books were with 10 different vendors, and they built their own website for some of the colloquially reports, and they were doing their own for their image library, and they realized like their customers have to go to all these different places to find what they want. But what the customer's really looking for is, what do you have on my topic, the area that I'm researching? You know, what do you have that's available in that? So this is really what they were after, was to pull it all together and put it in one place. So I'm going to just kind of walk through it. Might be a little tough to see, huh? I don't know if I can zoom in on this. I'm not that facile with the tool here, but bear with me because I'll talk you through it. So this is showing a page of their new website where they've brought together periodicals, books, and other kinds of content. And I pulled up this search page in particular. Sorry, I'm getting a little too far from the mic. I pulled up this search page in particular because it shows a number of really interesting features that leverage the power of the semantic technology that they built this platform on. So the first one are what they call concept pages. And the concept pages, if you look across the top, there's a menu bar that you can go. And basically what it lets you do is it lets you navigate their taxonomy. And when you click on a node in that taxonomy, so say it's about Escherichia coli, you're going to find everything they have on that topic. And one of the things that's really powerful about that is it lets them stand up a new page in a matter of minutes. So when the bird flu was all in the news and these guys publish all this stuff about H1N1, overnight they can stand up a page and become the destination for anybody that wants to figure out, like, what do we know about this, right? So it's really great because all of a sudden, you know, they're the place to go. The other thing in the sort of in the middle here, it's the left-hand rail, if you will, of the search results. There's some faceted filters, so they can go through after they've gotten search results, and you can drill down. And this is also based on the taxonomy. So there's things like the category cell, tissue, and organ systems, and then subterms below there, disorders and diseases. And so it lets them very much in like an Amazon-like fashion. They can further filter their results, right? So what's showing up in those facets in that left rail are just the terms that were present in these search results. So they can further filter those search results and really drill down quickly to what they're looking for. And then the last thing is in the middle, labeled as C, or what we call concept results. So basically what we've done is we've weighted the concept pages higher in the search results so that if there's a concept page that exists for the term you're searching, you get a link, you could just go and start at that page. And that's all really supported and driven by the underlying semantic technology. So this is an example of a concept page. Again, it's got some filters. This is from a beta version of the site, so we're only showing 12 results in here, but they have a lot more content than that. So again, it's just a quick place to go, find out everything they have about Escherichia coli as an example. There's also, you can drill down into more specific topics, you can back out into more general topics, because it's all structured around their taxonomy. And then the last page of the examples that I want to show here is this key concept ranking. So over to the right is sort of the fingerprint, if you will, of the aboutness of this chapter or article. So we have all this rich semantic technology, or semantic markup, that's applied to each chapter and each article in their corpus. And we can give you visually a really quick idea, oh, what's this chapter about? What's this article about? So it's another feature that that really leverages the semantics. Okay, so again, why is semantic technology important here? There's a huge volume of content, and what this technology does is it allows us to search, present, and navigate that content along topical lines, because that's how the users think. That's what they care about. And they can slice through it and get to the stuff that matters to them much more efficiently. Some of the supporting technologies that underlie this solution here are the taxonomy, number one. What ASM did was they leveraged the existing MESH taxonomy, the medical subject headings taxonomy, and then, because that's very general for a microbiologist, they then applied or enhanced that with some specific microbiological taxonomies as well. They used Themis's Luxid toolset, which is entity extraction and enrichment tool. It uses a linguistic technology. There's sort of two types. One is more computational. This is actually linguistic, where it's parsing sentences to find the parts of the sentence and figure out what are the entities, and then mapping those entities. And then all of that rich semantic coding that's extracted, they process the entire corpus of ASM's content in order to do this, is stored in a triple store that was developed by their platform partner, Publishing Technology, on a platform they call Pub2Web. So just some thoughts or key considerations as people are thinking about getting involved in and maybe implementing semantic technology to support their content sets. It's really important to have solid, clear business objectives to help guide you along the way, even from the highest level. Like, why are we doing this? Are we looking at developing new products? Are we trying to reach new customers? Are we trying to retain, the customers that we have? And be really clear, because semantic technologies it's pretty complex. It's pretty heady stuff, and it's really easy to start to lose your way, become enamored of the technology itself, and kind of forget why you went into the swamp, So it's so important to have that to map back to and say, look, it helps you make those difficult decisions as you move through the process. Include user input early and often. Again, that guards against technologists implementing the things that are cool and interesting to them, as opposed to really implementing what's going to provide value to your customer. Getting the semantic tools right is going to require a lot of iterative testing and tuning. So one of the things that we found really challenging is that one man's gold is another man's junk. If I'm researching a very specific microorganism, in fact, some specific aspect of that microorganism, that's all I care about. So everything else becomes noise to me, right? But flip that around, and somebody else, well, that's noise to them. They don't care. So it's tricky to kind of tune. There's sort of ways you can set thresholds for relevancy, and a lot of it has to be tested and put in front of users, to say, are we getting this right? To find a happy balance between precision and breadth is really what you're talking about. Sometimes people want the very precise answer, and at times they want the broad coverage. So, managing both of those things can be a little tricky, and getting user feedback is key. And then the testing and tuning. And then the last thing is just sort of a head up, is you can't start with taxonomy governance soon enough. So much of this is really driven by the taxonomy, and a taxonomy, it's really an expression of the language of a community. And language evolves, right? It's a living, breathing thing. So especially in research, for example, new terms are being invented to describe the new things that we've discovered. So you really need to keep that taxonomy up to date. And it's interesting, some of the debates and deliberation that can go on when you get two microbiologists in a room and say, it's not called this, it's called that. And you need a way, you need a method, a documented method and approach to kind of navigate through those things. So, yep. So that's what I have. I'm going to turn it over to Terry now.
Hello, I'm Terry Mendelson from Mendelson Consulting. Mendelson Consulting specializes in the design, development, and launch of advanced information-rich B2B digital products. So I'm going to be focusing today on how product development can be greatly enhanced by large-scale data, or big data as it's commonly known, and visualizations. Together, these form a really powerful combination. So, by way of defining terms here, let me start by saying that I tend to operate with IBM's definition of big data. It's a term widely bandied around. There are a lot of different ways to think about it. It's amorphous and getting defined as we go along, but I think the 4 V's approach sums it up pretty well. Big data has tremendous volume. There are over 2.5 quintillion bytes of data that are generated every day by things like cell phones and social media and sensors of various sorts. The veracity of big data is an issue. There's a lot of uncertainty underlying it. Only a small portion of the data gets used or viewed at any given time, and knowing, for example, when it's corrupted is challenging. Then there's the velocity of the data. In the user now, or publisher in this case, has to be prepared to process this onslaught of data that's streaming in on a real-time basis and be able to turn it around, as well as the variety of the data. So structured, unstructured, the systems that now exist allow publishers to aggregate data in one place, whereas previously it all been siloed. And as a result, you've got this much larger corpus of data and a large variety of sources of the data, as well as types of the data. So, but the opportunity is there for publishers. The technology surrounding big data has evolved to the point where there's some really powerful tools, and the price point has also come down to the degree that a large range of companies are able to work with it now. And so it's a matter of getting your mind around some of the challenges and opportunities surrounding that. So I think there are many to be had. There are challenges, unquestionably, but the opportunities, I think, bear attention. So I tend to think of product development as having 3 phases when you're thinking about the data aspect of it. So there's the data discovery phase, where you're figuring out just what data you have and what's meaningful about it. And then there's the audience targeting phase, where you're looking at, well, now I know what data I have, what does this mean to my audience? And furthermore, who is my audience? And then there's finally the product development phase, where based on what you know about your data and your audience, you start thinking about how to slice and dice the data and deliver a meaningful product from it. In the first 2 of these phases, data discovery and audience targeting, there's great opportunities in terms of advanced analytics to optimize process models, do predictive modeling about what your users, what behavior is going to be, to mine the data, to drill. You've got such large-scale data now, where historically you might have been working with smaller sample sets, or again, the siloed data. Now you can drill down systematically across a wide spectrum of data. Forecasting and planning are enhanced by this, decision trees, and fundamental to any conversation about big data, statistical analysis. Then there's, when you get to the actual creation of the product and information delivery, this large-scale data is really valuable in terms of reporting, creating hierarchies of data, offering alerts for threshold shifts. So if something changes in the data, the user gets alerted and can act upon it. Again, drilling of various kinds and extracting large chunks of data. In light of the scale of the data, however, the days where one could sit down with an Excel spreadsheet and eyeball it and identify where the ahas are and see where the patterns emerge are long gone. And as a consequence, essential to working with big data is also the ability to visualize it. And Pat has alluded to some of the tools that are out there now that allow one to do that. And there are a lot of benefits that emerge when you are now able to see quickly and intuitively where the patterns are within the data. And so once those patterns emerge, then you can see your way forward and start thinking about how you're going to innovate with the data. These tools, these visualization tools, also allow you to expose errors and find exceptions or outliers in the data, as well as to sell the science externally and internally. Going to senior management or your customers or your team and saying, we've got this great data, there are terrific opportunities with it, let's go forward, is simply not going to work. And so using visualizations to communicate, again, intuitively where the patterns are in the data will allow these different constituencies to see for their own where the opportunities are. So when combining the data and the visualizations, when you're starting at the beginning of this process of data discovery, the data and the visualizations are going to allow you to figure out where the meaningful reserves of data. How good is the data? How impactful is it? You can have a large reservoir of low-grade data and pockets of really high-grade data, but you need to know where they are and understand what the differences are among them before you can start using them. So here I wanted to share a really powerful visualization that Collective was kind enough to share with me. They use data and visualizations to do predictive analytics for marketing and advertising customers. So what you can see here is how they have looked at feature groups, which is the rows of colored dots, that perform well for different models. It could be a variety of products, so cellular phones, sneakers, what have you. The circle size tells you about the impact of the data, and the color tells you about the feature. So you'll see that there are a lot of large bubbles of data across the top in the pinks and red region, and then these indicate that they've got these features are really meaningful to the product model. But then down toward the bottom, you see highlighted the green dot, where actually the quality of the data is generally degraded. But here's an exception where there is a particular feature group where there's some really meaningful trove of data that customers like and make an impact on the value of the model. And so this is signaling, at the very least, that you need to drill down and understand what it is about those features that is so compelling to users. Oh, and to our effort to bring to your attention technologies that are emerging and powerful, the software that was used to visualize this data was ggplot2 library in R, and the software used to mine the data was a combination of Hadoop, Netezza, and R. So moving on to the next phase of the product development, audience targeting. The combination, again, of the data and the visualizations can be really powerful when you're doing predictive analytics and trying to understand your user's behavior, whether it's driving conversions to purchase or engaging with them more closely or lifting brand awareness. You'll get insights into what the demographics of your target users and what it is that they're interested in, which will inform how they're going to respond to your product. And then also what personas you want to focus on developing. When you're creating a product, particularly on the scale of something using these large-scale data, it's reasonable to expect that you're going to have a wider variety of users. So how those users interact with your data and what sort of experience they have is going to vary. You might have the CFO who wants to look at one angle of the data and managers who are looking at an entirely different one, although the two are related. But it's helpful to think about creating personas that define what content features and functionality you're providing to those different user needs, to meet those different user needs. And understanding your audience is going to help you do that. So here you can see an example of where Collective went out and was interested in understanding who would be likely to purchase video games. And they looked at both males and females across a range of incomes, ages, interests, and purchasing patterns, and found that young males on the lower end of the income spectrum who were interested in games and music and technology and who had recently purchased electronics and entertainment were likely also to buy video games. Women, not so much. I should add that the real aha in this was that the lift that you could get out of selecting demographic features historically was about 50%. But here in a predictive model where you're combining all this demographic information, you could get closer to 500% or more lift in conversions. Excuse me. And again, the software used to visualize was the ggplot2, and the software to mine the data was Hadoop, Netezza, and R. So finally, you've come to understand your universe of opportunity, and you want to start thinking about creating a product. And then you can turn to your data and visualizations of it in order to understand what questions do your users want answered. What insight does a user gain from linking to additional content? What has changed? What will be affected? You now have longitudinal data, which has historically had been siloed and now is no longer, because you can centralize data in one place. And so you can see cause and effect relationships between different types of data. So for example, a crude one, if there are delays in oil shipments that are going to affect the oil price is going to affect the pricing in commodities, and changes in commodity pricing are going to impact the stock market. You can see the relationships now among these different types of data and change your behavior on it. So here's a really juicy example that I really enjoyed working with. So this is from Lloyd's List. Lloyd's List is a website, formerly a paper print publication, that focuses on the shipping industry. They were owned by Lloyd's Insurance, the venerable British insurance company that was founded in the 1600s. But Lloyd's List was eventually spun off in the 1990s. And they have created this GPS coordinates tracking tool that is available on a subscription basis. And it allows you to see the position of ships of various kinds around the globe. So this could be oil tankers, cargo ships, cruise vessels, and all of these typically now carry GPS transponders, and so they can be tracked at any given time. What's unique about the Lloyd's List version of this is that they have relationships with agents at ports around the globe who can visually confirm that a ship is where it says it is. This tool is the result of data from hundreds of data sources. There are 90 sources of data just for the ownership of the ships alone. And the technology underlying this, the data is analyzed using MarkLogic tools. Here you can see the historical route and current location of vessels. So it's not just here and now, it's where has this ship been. And therefore it's really valuable to law enforcement, for example, who want to confirm that ships from sanctioned countries are not entering restricted areas. Or investors who are tracking the supply of oil and want to do an arbitrage play if, for example, some of the tankers are delayed in their routes. Or customers who want to see if their deliveries are going to be held up and so they can make other arrangements. And then finally, this visualization, which was done in partnership with a startup out of London, formerly known as i2. Now it's been acquired by IBM and is called IBM Visual Analytics. Here you can see the ownership of Iranian oil tankers. And I know it's really tiny, so it's hard for me to see. But basically, you can turns out that these ships are huge and enormously expensive, and in order to mitigate risk so that an incident with one vessel isn't going to impact the entire fleet, the vessels have multiple owners. This makes tracking ownership for the purposes of investment insurance particularly challenging and valuable. So this visualization allows the user to establish how many owners a vessel has, how many owners in common the entire fleet shares, and who owned the vessel in the past. So, there's some green lines. Here you can see who the historical owner was. Here you can see nodes of common ownership. This sort of information would have been much harder to, deliver and digest in writing, or a combination of writing and images. But here you have the entire Iranian oil fleet laid out for you in one image, which is clearly much more digestible and drawn from, as we said earlier, 90 different sources potentially. I have to say, in the course of thinking about this talk and the issue of the opportunities surrounding big data and visualizations in general for certainly the publishing industry and product developers like me, is where's all this heading? On the spectrum of total automation where you just press one button and everything you get spit out an image like this, to the other end of the spectrum, which no longer is human generated only. We've moved more to the center of that spectrum where it's a combination of the two. What does the future hold for the role of the human being in the whole process? And it turns out that this Lloyd's List tool, so it turns out that this GPS tool is 80% automated and 20% driven by human analysts. the human knowledge of the shipping industry is really invaluable for lending perspective where automated systems just don't have that level of understanding. For example, it turns out that Singapore is a very frequently used port because it's very efficient and the fuel costs are very low there. So fuel costs are low and the port is very efficient. So a large number of ships actually route through Singapore even though it's not on their route. And they don't have anything to deliver there and they don't have anything to pick up there either. But because of these cost and efficiency benefits, it's worth their while to make a detour. But it's only the human analysts who would know that sort of thing. The system, the computers, and software don't have that level of subtlety in their understanding. And in fact, Lloyd's List sends its programmers to training courses on the shipping industry just so that they can bring that extra level of knowledge to bear when they're creating products. So the challenges that big data present do exist. No question. There's a lot that needs to be sorted out. But these, I believe, are actually balanced by the opportunities that it presents as well. The richness of information that's now available, that 360-degree view that you're able to offer to your users, just simply wouldn't have been possible before. Now, with these large-scale data and visualization tools, there's a real richness that we're able to present that's very exciting and still allows plenty of room for human contribution. Thank you. Oh, I will add one last thing. Sorry, Jerry. If you have, I would love to hear from you if you have some big data visualizations that you've dealt with or been exposed to. I'd love it if you could share it with me. My coordinates will be posted again later. I'm at terry@mendelsonconsulting.net. But I think there'd be some interesting information sharing to be done around this. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jerry Mintz, managing partner at Percepta Partners, and Percepta Partners is a company that helps B2B companies mostly with their product and market strategy. So I am all about workflow integration. So far today we've heard about a number of different aspects of product creation. We've heard about the use of semantic processing to make sense of textual data that has advanced very significantly. We've heard about some of the big data solutions that operate on both numerical and textual data, capabilities that are increasing at an exponential pace in terms of what can be done, how much data can be processed. And one aspect of presenting information to people, which is visualization, which is still designed to help a human with decision support. But there's a whole category of applications that are significantly enhanced if you can get the information into the user's workflow at the right point in time, ideally in an automated fashion. And so what I'd like to talk about today is, what is workflow integration? And why is it important for information providers? And I know that all of you understand at some level about workflow integration, but I'd like to give you some examples that will hopefully get you thinking a little more broadly. How does mobile fit into the mix? Mobile is a workflow solution. The fact that you can have access to data when you're on the road, if that information is critical to you and you need it when you're on the road, then having it through a mobile device is a workflow solution. And you can get a lot smarter about how you integrate that information with other solutions. And timeliness of data and latency of delivery start to become really important. I spent a big part of my career in the financial technology and information world, where people talk now about latencies in the nanoseconds for data processing, but real-time data is really a relative thing. And so, for example, in the shipping case that Terry mentioned, it could make a huge difference to somebody to get the information today about where a particular ship is as opposed to tomorrow. And so getting that information today is real time, even though it's not real time in markets that trade in nanoseconds. So I want to talk about that. We'll give a couple of examples that I think illustrate the strength of workflow integration. Talk a little bit about the benefits, costs, and challenges of moving up the food chain, and that leads to thinking about how you can do this without major investment. So I think this slide, I'm sorry it's a little information dense, but this is meant to be kind of a ladder that takes you up the continuum of more and more complex workflow integration, and we'll give some examples later of that. I have my own kind of theorem. We talk a lot, people often use the term data business and information business interchangeably, but I don't think of them as being interchangeable. The data business to me is about selling data to people. Software is usually involved at some level to process the data or present the data, but it's still relatively basic. I'm giving you data and you got to do something with it. Information to me is a combination of data and software. And software working with data yields really valuable information, and the further up the food chain you can go in workflow integration, I think the more valuable it becomes. I call that kind of the, it's like Einstein's mass energy equivalence for information business people. So one of the simplest things you can do in workflow integration is to provide reference materials for customers to look up on your website. Those reference materials might be generated using very complex technology, such as Mark talked about, but you're still going to a website to look something up, and you're making some notes or gathering some information, and then you're going somewhere else to do work, although in some cases your work involves reading and thinking about what you see. So that's kind of a very basic level. If you go up a level and you make it easy for people to extract information and deposit it into their own systems, you can add more value. So make it really easy for customers to take a lot of data and drop it in Excel, because that's what they want to do, or that's part of their analytical workflow. Companies like FactSet have built their business on really two simple things. One is providing a lot of data sources that they cross-reference, and the second is making it really easy to get that data into Excel and support analyst models. And that's a very sticky proposition, because the customers who use that kind of system end up building their own intellectual property around that model. And once you have built up, months, years, decades of models and stuff built around somebody's platform, you pretty much have to dynamite it out of there. And so it is very powerful if you can figure out what the customer's workflow is. Like, I'm an analyst and I'm going to live in Excel. You're not going to be able to do everything for me in a web screen, no matter how good you are at it. So give me the data in the form I want it, and if you can do it in a sticky way, that's very powerful. The next level up, or another level up, is to look at the platforms that the customers are using and say, how do I get my data into that platform? So, for example, if you happen to be a data provider who has a lot of information about market segments, how people, different people, whether it's demographics of the segment or preferences or things like that, and that information is useful in sales to segment your customers, then you are way better off to get that data inside Salesforce.com, where the salesperson can use it in their workflow. And if you make it really easy to do that integration, and lots of people are in the Salesforce ecosystem, you are more likely to get selected by somebody. And I would say that in general, not always, but in general, well-integrated data is more valuable than higher quality data. You can get away with potentially lower quality, maybe less coverage, if you make it easier, if you save people time in their workflow. So that's another level up. In the world of mobile, providing device-aware solutions to enable your customers to get information wherever they are is really valuable. And we all have lots of examples from the consumer world, so I don't need to delve into it. But device-aware is important. We all know how useless it is to go to a website that was designed for a computer screen and try to read it on our mobile device. So the really smart players are saying, well, what does this person really need right now? And increasingly, those are location aware, which means I'm looking at flight information and I'm in the airport, and it knows what airport I'm in because it knows where I am through the GPS. Why don't you assume I want information about my next flight and start me somewhere like that? So becoming device aware, using the device, and then narrowing down the information that may be presented is part of making the workflow so much easier. Next level would be providing, and I sort of gave an example of that now, context-relevant information. So context-relevant is where am I? A lot of marketing automation now is focused around knowing where that customer is physically, using the GPS coordinates, knowing who that person is through all of the various systems that are available, data sources that are available, and now making offers to that person based on them walking by this store or this aisle in the store. And so the more of that you can do, the more likely you are to be successful as a vendor of data into that application, because you allow the ultimate customer to get value without having to do any work. The next level up is you kind of go all the way into the software business and you say, why don't I provide a platform that actually implements the workflow my client wants, build my data into that, and potentially even bring in data from other sources, because now I become the interface for the customer. I become the tool, or I provide the tool through which they do their business, and that again becomes really sticky. So the classic example, in the financial technology business, something like the Bloomberg terminal or the Reuters terminal are sticky because people have learned how to use those products and have built things in, and lots of applications they need are there, and so they're less likely to switch to another solution because there's a huge learning curve involved and loss of value. And that's kind of at the top level. Integrate with other solutions that are related to create an ecosystem. And so when you think about the things we've heard about today, you are no longer limited in any way by what that device can do. You have high bandwidth connectivity into a world of big data solutions, visualization solutions, cloud-based solutions that can allow you to integrate with other sources. And so you can really kind of go nuts and put in the hands of your users a very, very powerful combination of data sources, third-party applications, your own applications, etc. So let's take a look at just a few comments about some of the underlying technologies or some of the thoughts behind it, and then we'll jump into some examples. So clearly, pretty obvious, you've got to support multiple browsers with any information. We talked about device-aware displays that work on, or device-aware solutions that work across platform. There are lots of toolkits out there that allow you to design an app and that will produce that app for you in both an Android and an iOS version. The idea that you have to build different products for that has pretty much gone away. There's enough higher level solutions to do it. Web services interfaces are really important. Making your data easy to integrate with other vendors' data in a client app makes you really valuable. In fact, there are a couple of smart companies out there whose entire business model is about being the back end of providing data, for example, geo data to information about cities, things like that, to other apps who want to bring that data to the front. So think about your channels and provide, the up-to-date web services capabilities to support that. Support integration with third-party apps. Again, web services helps, but sometimes you need to go a little farther to provide that. Think about real-time data delivery as a disruptor. If you can change the dynamic of when you have data available, and you can make that data available in a streaming fashion to people, you change the game. I'll give you an example I know of in financial services industry. Interactive Data is one of the largest providers of fixed income pricing. Every day they price literally millions of securities using proprietary models. And historically that's been a batch process. So, 3 times a day around the world the models are run and the data is produced. But the markets, even the fixed income markets, are moving faster than that. And they have over the last few years, part of the benefit of being not public and owned by big private equity, is they've revamped their system to go to continuous processing. And they now can and do produce, not across the segment yet, real-time fixed income pricing. In other words, they run their models, and if some underlying parameters that drive the models move by more than a certain point, all the prices are recalced and produced. That's a huge shift in the industry. That is a disruptive shift in the industry, because now you're going onto trading desks and into back offices where people are assessing risk, and you're able to assess changes in the market during the day. So that's just one example. There are many examples of when you can bring data to people in near real time. Makes a big difference. Partnering, acquiring, building applications to automate key workflows and potentially disrupt your marketplace. If your industry works in a certain way and you can create an application and combine it with your data and change the way the industry works by providing a new pathway that's more productive or cheaper or faster or higher quality, and you can adapt users into that space, then the world will change. And again, I'll go to a financial example, but probably, although latency was always important in trading, it was really about 10, maybe 15 years ago that people started to get serious about lower latency and algorithmic trading. And it has evolved to the point where it not only changed who the players are and how people do that, it changed the industry. The whole markets are completely different today as a result of the application of technology than they were 10, even 5 years ago. So you can change an industry, and the winners and losers are different. There are different players who are winners and losers because of the adaptation of technology. And the last one, and one of the newest things we're seeing, we'll give an example, is instrumentation of apps. So everybody's able to see what customers are doing on the website, and if you've done a good job, you're tracking all their interactions, and you're studying those using some of the techniques that Terry talked about, and understanding how your customers use the product and where they're getting value and all of that. But once you go into an app, you've pretty much been blind, right? You give somebody an app, you kind of know what data's coming back, but you don't really know what they're doing. Well, now there are some really great software development tools out there that allow you to put that kind of instrumentation into an app and track what your users are doing and actually interact with your users, and I'll show you some of that. So my message about the technology is there's a lot of good technology out there to help people build better workflow solutions, but you don't have to go and do it all yourself. There's lots of great ways to partner and lots of technologies that make it easy to do that partnering. Sometimes it's right to do it yourself if you really have a lot of domain knowledge and you're capturing that in a workflow solution. Sometimes the workflow is simple and you can use some commercial tools to get in there. So let's talk about a couple of examples. So restaurant reviews embedded in maps. Pretty obvious to people how valuable that is, but think about, it wasn't that many years ago, what, 6 years ago that Zagat was sold to Google? What did Zagat's have? 20 million, 30 million, 40 million in revenue? How much revenue does Google make today from the same restaurant reviews sitting in maps? It's got to be measured in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Who knows how big that is? Perfect example of taking information that was of good quality and embedding it in the map to make it easy for people to find it. The map knows where you are, to look up reviews. The trend now is to start bringing social data into that, so not only what do the people who reviewed for Zagat's think, but what do your friends think, and to help do rankings. But a simple example, but a really powerful one of how workflow integration can really change the dynamic. And obviously using geolocation and other parameters make it easier to add more value of that type. Here's an example. I talked a bit about low latency. Here's an example of not low latency on market data. This is news. And so people are now looking at how they can process the news using semantic technology and big data technologies in real time to feed algorithms to make trading decisions. And so companies like Thomson Reuters have responded by making available lower latency news sources. In fact, I think the federal government has put a little embargo on the, it used to be that they did the news releases, unemployment or whatever, and they were given to the news organizations and held in embargo. And the low latency traders, basically the news organizations had everything teed up, and literally, at 8 a.m. plus 1 nanosecond, that was released and everybody had the data, and that changed the game. A personal example, many years ago, when I ran a business at Thomson called Asset-Backed Securities Group, and one of the things we did was we used to get the mortgage tapes from the agencies. We were an agent. We would get the tapes, we would duplicate the tapes on embargo, and then at 8 a.m. on whatever day they were released, couriers from all the big banks would come and get these tapes, and they would run them back to their offices, and they'd run all their analysis and figure out what all the mortgage securities were worth so they could do their trading. And I kind of looked at this and I thought, if they're paying whatever they were paying us, $1,000 a month or something for this, how much would they pay if I could deliver them the data in seconds? And we created a system with T1s where they ate it up. They paid something like $10,000 a month. It was a no-brainer for them that instead of losing a half an hour of processing, that they could have the data at 8:01. So, this is a really good game to think about in other markets where people haven't necessarily been as attuned to latency as the financial markets. Here's one I really love. V12 has been around for a very long time. They're a provider of demographic information into marketing. So people use them in advertising campaigns, email campaigns. They have all sorts of information about businesses and consumers and where they reside and all of that. And, I think they were doing fine, but in about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, they decided that they wanted to be the providers of the solution for campaign management. So they built this application they call Launchpad, which of course uses their data and allows marketeers to coordinate campaigns across multiple channels, email, advertising campaigns, direct mail, whatever, a solution that didn't really exist in the industry. And this has sort of changed the nature of their business because now people who use their solution obviously can buy from them. They will import anybody else's data. I mean, they have relationships with other data vendors, but now they have the relationship with the customer. And the customer is coming to them with new needs and talking to them about what they need. And so they're hearing it first from the customer. So I think this is a great example. It's a SaaS solution. I think they built it themselves. They may have had I'm sure they had some technology partners. But to me, a great example of an information vendor moving up the food chain and offering a much more comprehensive and sticky product. And I think Kathy, I think they spoke at one of the investment conferences.
Last year's investment.
Last year, right, okay, yeah, very impressive guys. Here's I think the last one, this product called AppBoy, and there are a couple of ones like this coming in the market. So what AppBoy does is it's a software development toolkit. You embed it into your iPad or Android app. And the first thing it'll do is it knows who that user is, and the user has to permission it, of course, but it will capture all the information in the user's interaction with the game or the application or whatever, and it will help you understand who that user is. So some of the examples that Terry showed with the user breakdowns, you can get all the demographics of the user, when in the day are they using it, who are they, etc. So now you have all that information. You can now engage with them. You can say, you know what, we noticed that you know, at between the hours of 6 and 8, that this demographic is always playing this game. So I'm going to put a promotion on for this kind of person to buy an in-app application, and I'm going to put that app up for sale to them, that in-app add-on for sale during these hours. And literally the marketing manager, whoever, can literally hit a button and that will go out to the people who fit that demographic, the users who fit that demographic. And then once you've implemented it, of course, obviously you can measure the result. So you've taken this world of apps that has to date really been hidden, and you're now turning it into something equivalent to what you've been able to do in a web session. And if you don't have this, you're flying blind. Now, a lot of this stuff, part of the fun, I think, in the B2B world is historically, a lot of stuff was developed in B2B first, and then it kind of made its way into consumer. But as we all know here, technology is being driven on the consumer side, so honestly, you don't have to think too hard to figure out whether something's going to work, because your customer is probably used to interacting, and you can show people examples from consumer to get a sense of how this is going to work in your B2B world. There's no reason it must drive everybody crazy in B2B world to have all this sophisticated technology to book a flight or pick a restaurant, and then they go back to some, you know, antiquated computer terminal giving them access to information. There's no reason not to think about blending those, and the technology risk is so low because these platforms have been, you know, so well tested, and you know, zillions of dollars poured into developing these applications and platforms. So, oops, let me just go back up. So that's the story. Hopefully, a good flavor for people on workflow integration. I saw a lot of nods in the room, so I'm sure people are thinking about this, but just hopefully gives you a good overview of the range of technologies available. And at the end of the day, the value here is customer stickiness. You can sell them more, you can engage with them more, they stay with you longer, and it gives you the opportunity to do more with that client because you are much more important to their day-to-day work, and that's what workflow integration is all about. So thanks.
Okay. So, that was a lot. It's good stuff. So I've got 4 points. I want to keep it simple, but our summary is we can see linked data and linked content enabled through some of these content technologies are going to drive the next generation of product, and sometimes and digital products as well. So that's one example. Triples are an example of that, and if we have time, we'll do some explanation of what that is. But it's linking data and building relationships between data, diseases and drugs. What drugs cure which diseases is one example. Visualization tools become the products in and of themselves, and we saw that with the Lloyd's list intelligence. It's both an analytical tool, but it also, those maps themselves are the product. Content can be leveraged into new products. Mark's presentation with the American Society for Microbiology, I mean, that was great. They're taking this content, creating supersets, and providing different ways of navigating through it that are also boundaryless. And that, I think, is a very key and powerful message, that the next generation of digital product will be boundaryless. And aggregated content delivered through workflow and mobile. I mean, Jerry's examples, particularly of V12 and their Launchpad, is a really good example of that. So I think we have delivered as well on data, content, emerging technologies, and. So, do we have questions? Yeah.
If you can repeat the question for
Sure.
the videotape.
Absolutely.
Fran?
Oh, yeah. Great presentations, all of you. Really was great. What was interesting for me was that the word database was never actually mentioned in this session. So
Yay.
thinking about, you mentioned technologies, you like Mark Logic, they create structured from unstructured data. MongoDB, right, positions themselves as the unstructured database. Aggregation tools, right? Pulling data from disparate information sources. So the question is the relational database dead in the context of building digital information products? Or what's the role of the relational database?
So the question is the relational database dead, or what is its role in building future information products? Jerry?
Yeah, I would say that I don't think the relational database is dead, and NoSQL doesn't mean no SQL. It means not only SQL. And people continue to use SQL. It's a very powerful tool. It's a very logical way to express things, and relational databases are good for certain things, and unstructured databases are good for other things, and time series databases, which we can talk about at all, are good for another class of things. So I don't think relational databases are dead.
Jerry and I heard somebody at a meetup 2 nights ago exactly about this. It's a financial, new fintech product for lending. It has so much data. They outgrew all the databases, so they're storing the data, and when they need it, they pull it out and put it into a database.
Well, that is an emerging model, is store everything in a Hadoop because you're not sure what you really want to
Right.
relate or correlate. And then you pull out subsets and put it in an SQL database and then manage your product or the correlations off of that.
They were using MongoDB.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
What about legacy systems? One of the complaints that some consultants that I work with have regularly is moving up the food chain is very difficult because of legacy systems that don't vary, that don't meet. TD Bank, as an example, has disparate, if I'm a marketer inside TD Bank and I need a database of the marriage between my retail banking client and my mortgage banking client, it's a nightmare to even get that information, number one. Number two, they don't talk the same language, they don't speak the same language. What have you found in terms of corporations becoming smarter about that?
So the question is, and that's a really good question, is what about legacy data? And legacy data in silos across business units that have customer information, financial information, and the structure of that data is hard to get at, and it doesn't follow the same format.
I'm happy to give one answer. Other people may have a comment. I think one of the big breakthroughs more recently is that in the past, if you wanted to combine data from this data, Terry's database and Mark's database, you need to analyze the structure and get it into a third database and figure out what's the key and how do you do that. You really don't have to do that anymore. You can take the data from both databases, put it into one of these databases that is good at handling unstructured data, and you can actually find relationships without having to force the structure. So one of the companies that you see doing a lot of this is 1010 Data. I don't know if you're familiar with those guys, but they do a lot with, they historically did a lot of financial markets, but they do a lot with supermarket data, retail data, things like that. And what they'll show you are examples in their, what do they call it, their million-row spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a spreadsheet type interface, but they'll basically pull in disparate data and just throw it in there, and the system will find connections. It will start to relate this field to that field. And so it's easier today to do some of that stuff. It's still not simple, and some of the problems in banks have to do with regulatory restrictions on who can see what data. That's a very different problem. But there are tools out there that do it. I know, Mark, you may have a comment on that as well.
Yeah, I think I would just add, I mean, in a way, I think we need to be moving to a world where we stop pretending that data is structured. Because it's not structured. We apply structure to it. We make it behave in ways that we want it to. And we have all these legacy systems that served a purpose. And now we're moving into a world, we want that data to do more different things. So I think it is about building those new tools, pulling it into those new environments as a way of leveling that. I think I see that in particular with I like to make the distinction between content and data, but I think that's even starting to blur for me a bit, that for so long we were trying to ram content into database systems. Very, very thorny problem. People bled a lot around that one, and I think really, looking at it a little further back, that we really do the same thing with data itself,
I think the other thing I just to add on top of that comment is the other big difference is cloud computing. You do not have to anymore invest in, so in the example we're talking about, if you wanted to bring those two disparate databases together, you had to invest in new technology to bring the database in and put some servers in and analysts and doing all that. Well, you don't really have to do that. Get the data sets up in the cloud into one of these things, and you can try different solutions. The cost of experimentation is close to zero. So, well, it's not zero, but I mean, it's until you go into production, it's pretty minimal in cost. So you can do more of those things today. I mean, there's no silver bullet, but there's a lot you can do that you couldn't do before.
That's a really good point, bringing in those cloud services. And Amazon Web Services has really lowered the barrier to entry for creating new products, but also for ingesting and analyzing legacy data in a very cost-effective way, because you're just paying for what you use, and then you can take it down when you're done.
I have a question for Mark about semantic processing. I'm wondering how mature that technology is, and I'm trying to wrap my head around the difference between that and really robust search. Is that about structured versus unstructured?
Yeah,
So,
that's exactly.
let me just repeat the question for the audience. Then the question is, how mature is semantic technology, and what's the difference between semantic and search? Really robust search. Yeah. Okay, good.
So that's a great question. I think the semantic technology is still emerging, so tools like the Temis tool that I talked about and other similar tools, people are getting benefit from them. I mean, they're real systems up and running that use those things. What's tricky about it is they often depend on a lot of input from subject matter experts, building taxonomies that supplement the tool. I mean, the taxonomy itself is a tool, but it's kind of a document. You know what I mean? It's not hardware and software, but the semantic technologies don't work well without those taxonomies. So they really need to be developed together. To the question about how's that differentiated from really smart search? Search can't tell you if, I'm trying to think of a good example, if there's a concept that's mentioned in a chapter, right? Or the chapter could be all about a particular concept and never use the word. It could never use the word, right? So taxonomy and semantics allow you to apply that and really understand it's about this, even though we never said it, So it enhances search a lot in that way.
Can I just add to that? So in the education market, some of the rubrics for determining competency may not actually use the term of the competency in it, but if there was a semantic level behind it, then you would be able to search and find that. And that's important. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. As Pat mentioned, in the deck that I will be sending everybody, there is a great appendix so you can start researching companies if you would like. And the semantic conversation, I wanted to highlight, on June 17th, we have a semantic publishing boot camp. And we have case studies from Gannett, which is a media operation, Wiley, STM, and ALM, which is legal, obviously. And we're bringing together very different types of case studies because semantic technology can be used very differently in different types of information settings. So if you're interested in that, when I send you the deck, just click on the link to the Semantic Boot Camp. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for making the time today, and have a great evening, and I will be talking to everybody soon. And again, thank you to our panel. It's fantastic. Thank you.